John Cornyn is not going to be running unopposed for his United States Senate seat. He's going to end up facing this guy in a primary. His name is Mark Yancey. He lives in Dallas, longtime Dallas resident. Comes from a independent, privately held mergers and acquisitions boutique firm based in Dallas. He's the CEO. Is it, Mark, first of all, welcome to KPRC. Is it Ataka International?
It's Ataka International. Hi,
Ataka,
Jimmy.
okay.
Yeah. How are you? And thank you for having me.
Well, good to have you. I'm always, whenever somebody comes from the business world, wants to get involved in politics. Have you been in politics before? Or is this the first time running for something?
I have not. I would say at a very minor level I have been, but certainly nothing at this level.
What is going on with you then? What's wrong with you? Why do you want to get involved in politics?
Well, I've always been a student of politics, and I'm a proud Texan. I've lived here for 33 years. I have a daughter that's at West Point. So I think a good way to characterize it is I'm a Reagan Republican. I support fiscal responsibility, a very strong military. And I think we're in our group's opinion is that this election year is very eclectic. And we saw last year where if Cruz had just probably taken a right instead of a left, then Beto would have been would have won that Texas Senate seat. And so we think it's as I said, an eclectic year. We think that Senator Cornyn is running for his fourth term, as you know, has been in a leadership position in Washington. He's been a senator since 2002. It's our opinion. We started this, Mr. Barrett, about 3 months ago in terms of looking at what our chances are, and we deem them to be good for a lot of reasons. I'll just start with Senator Cornyn. We believe that, particularly as it relates to President Trump coming in 2016, is that Senator Cornyn has elected to rub elbows with the president and Mitch McConnell and not Texans. And, of course, I don't know you, but you're obviously a very bright guy, and you know that when you have two senators from each state, they're representative of the values of the state that they represent, and they should be working for the people and not beholden to an executive branch of our government, or in this case, the leader of the Senate.
Okay,
so,
well, that's interesting. I thought you were going to say something else. I thought you were going to say that John Cornyn is too moderate for your taste.
Well, no, I mean, listen, he is a moderate, and look, I would say there's some things that I'm moderate on, but I am a Reagan Republican. I would say that I am center, pushed over, a little bit to the right. You're not going to find me over in the right corner, but I would certainly characterize myself as being more conservative than Mr. Cornyn. But that's not really what troubles me. I think it's with Mr. Cornyn. Senator Cornyn. It is, we really don't know where he stands on his positions. And this goes back, I mean, again, he's been there since 2002. And so my comments really relate to his last term, now coming up on 5 years and change. And that is, we really don't know, Mr. Barrett, what his vote is until there's a vote taken, and then Senator Cornyn follows along with whichever way the wind's blowing. So another way to say that is that we have strong convictions that he's more of a follower than a leader. We think that Texans, there's a lot of dynamics, as you probably well know, Mr. Barrett, of people moving into the state of Texas from California, New York, New Jersey, and so that puts our state at risk of flipping blue for a lot of reasons. We saw that almost last year with the other Senate race. So we want to do what we can to stop that. We don't we want to walk. I think if you look at situations like what Bill Clinton did as a Democrat, kind of straddling in the middle and moving a little bit to the left, He was very good at doing that. If you look at Ronald Reagan, the way he and Tip O'Neill started off to be just complete enemies and didn't like each other. Next thing you know, these guys were just tilted a little bit to the right, and they were sipping whiskey over in the White House. So we think there's a path forward in Washington, and we'd like to have a senator that represents Texans and that can get along and lead and not be partisan and fight in everything that is done in Washington, D.C. Now, that's a blanket statement. You can say just about for everyone in Washington, D.C., but I'm not running against anyone but John Cornyn, so I'll just focus
I understand.
on that.
We're talking to Mark Yancey from Dallas. He is going after John Cornyn's Senate seat, considers himself a Reagan Republican, fiscally conservative. So being a fiscal conservative myself, I would say that you're probably being driven a little bit crazy by the national debt right now, aren't you?
Well, it is, and that's probably, as I look at this, that would be really, high on my list. So if I was fortunate enough to get through this, really I look at four tenets of the Republican Party, and that is, sound fiscal policy, limited government, strong military that embraces what I define as a needs-based military spending metric. And what I mean by that, Mr. Barrett, I think the F-35 is a good example where most of your listeners, perhaps yourself, would know that we've got hundreds of billions of dollars in overruns in that aircraft. And I'll stop there because I could go on for hours talking about it. For supportive of strong free trade and economic development. And so, for us, again, Mr. Cornyn voted for this most. We're closing our books. The government is that is on the 30th of September. And Mr. Cornyn voted for this north of $1 trillion deficit that will run, that will stack on top of the already 22 plus national debt that we already have. And so there's a lot to that. I mean, if you go back to the tax, look, I'm all for less government, staying out of people's pockets and, with taxes. I think perhaps there's not many good things I would have to say about Mr. Trump, although we come from the same party. But I think the idea of adjusting the taxes the way he did, albeit I'd have done it a little bit differently, was a very positive thing for the economy. But if you look at the tax rate, for every 1% increase in the corporate tax rate, it equates to approximately $500 billion in tax receipts. So if there would have been some, again, this goes back to an approach. This goes back, and you could draw a dotted line again to Senator Cornyn. Where was Senator Cornyn when this came up? So if we had gone from, we were at 39.1% on our corporate tax rate. If we would have adjusted that just a few hundred basis points, 2% or so, something, just talking out loud with you, we would have increased the tax receipts somewhere in the area of a couple trillion, just by not going down to 21, maybe stopping at 22, throwing numbers out. So, listen, then we'd be looking at, the deficit perhaps this year because, we're still fighting wars and we're still spending a lot of money on military and so forth. But it certainly wouldn't have been as onerous as what's been delivered to us. I'm not sure how, frankly, Mr. Barrett, how we're going to work ourselves out of this. It's going to take a long time for this to clear itself up. But with my business background, I believe I started 4 companies in my career, and all of them have been successful. I've employed hundreds of people with good paying jobs, and not once have we borrowed money to make our payroll. And I want to take that same concept to Washington, and I want to be fiscally responsive, and I want to figure out Again, I'll stop on this final note. And you remember on this campaign, although Trump's done, a few good things, but how many times did we hear that who's going to pay for the wall? And we see now who's paying for the wall. And I'll finish by saying that the money is coming out of the military budget, which is the number one line item in the national budget.
We'll have to leave it at that for now because we're out of time, Mark. But we'll talk again. I'm sure we'll talk numerous times again. And next time, feel free to call me Jimmy. Okay?
Well, thanks for having me, Jimmy. Okay, thank you.
Very good. Thank you for your time. What's your website, by the way? I see you got a campaign website.
It's at voteformark.com.
Voteformark.com. All right. That is Mark Yancey, the guy who would like to succeed John Cornyn, U.S. Senator from Texas. What'd you think of Mr. Yancey? I don't know yet. I have more of an opinion of him right now than I do John Cornyn. Mainly because I've never had a chance to talk to John Cornyn. John Cornyn is generally not available to the media for some reason. John Cornyn strikes me as being kind of wishy-washy. He doesn't... I very rarely see him speak out on anything close to a controversial issue. And he's certainly no Ted Cruz. He's not a conservative like Ted Cruz. He doesn't give you an eloquent explanation of his opinion the way Tom Cruise does. He seems to be afraid, strikes me as being somewhat afraid, of tough issues. So I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to listen to what Mr. Yancey has to say.